This is Nick with ReVenture Consulting, back with another ReVenture YouTube cast. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite real estate markets in the US. This is a market that's seeing tons and tons of growth. It's at the top of the tables on population growth, income growth, job growth, and as a result of all of that, real estate growth. The market we're talking about today is Salt Lake City, Utah. And so Salt Lake, as I just said, has been one of the fastest growing cities in the US. Real estate values there have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. So that's right. If you bought a house or bought real estate in Salt Lake City 10 years ago, you would have doubled your money by 2020. That's a pretty good return, isn't it? But what a lot of people ask me is, Nick, I know Salt Lake is growing fast, but what areas within Salt Lake, what zip codes, what neighborhoods are the ones achieving the fastest growth? Where should I look specifically to buy or invest in real estate? And then the other question is, all right, so Salt Lake has done well the last 10 years, but how is it going to do the next 10 years? Can we expect that type of growth going forward? This video is going to answer all of those questions. So if you are moving to Salt Lake City, if you are buying a home in Salt Lake, or if you are trying to invest in real estate in the area, you'll definitely want to watch this video. Without further ado, let's get going. So I'm going to start things off with a bit of a geography lesson. I'm sure a lot of the people here watching are in Salt Lake or know of the Salt Lake geography already, but for those who aren't, let's just take a quick geography lesson. Okay, so this map highlights the Salt Lake City region, and you'll see three different colors broken out here. In the red, we have all of the zip codes that are in the Salt Lake City, Utah metro statistical area. So that's all the zip codes here in the red. If we go south, the ones in the orange are in Provo, Utah. So Provo and Salt Lake are very close. They're kind of in the same valley, but they're, for all intents and purposes, two different metro areas. If you look up, real estate data on each, you'll see it separately. And then the third area here is Ogden, Utah, to the north in blue. So when we talk about the Salt Lake region, we're talking about three different metro areas. Salt Lake in the middle, Ogden to the north, Provo to the south. Now that we have that out of the way, let's start talking about real estate. So if you were to go back 15 years, the real estate values in these three metros in the Salt Lake region were actually very close to the US average, right around $200,000 for the average home. So you go back to 2005, these regions look pretty average. But then over the last 15 years, Salt Lake has really just separated itself from the rest of the US in terms of home value growth. And that's what this graph shows. So here we're looking at home value by year, going from basically 2006 to 2020. And the three red lines are Salt Lake City, Provo, and Ogden, and then the gray line is the US average home value. So going back to 2006, you could see that the gray line, the US average here, home value of 200,000, is basically the same as Salt Lake and Provo and a little higher than Ogden. So the Salt Lake region back in 2005 looks fairly average. But then you kind of fast forward through time, 2006 all the way to 2012 to 2018, and you see just these red lines start to take off in terms of their home value, all the way to the point where today Salt Lake City's average home value is $420,000. Back in 2010, it was $234,000. Similar story exists in Provo. Home value today, $380,000. Back in 2010, $220,000. Ogden, similar story. Home value went from $200,000 all the way up to $360,000. So we've just seen massive real estate growth in the Salt Lake region that has far outstripped that of the US average. That's what you see kind of by this increasing gap between the gray line and the red lines. So real estate investors who bought into Salt Lake 10 to 15 years ago are feeling pretty good right now. There's not many other areas in the country that you could have done better in terms of real estate appreciation. But with that said, not all areas within Salt Lake are created equal. While pretty much everywhere has done well, compared to the rest of the US, certain neighborhoods in certain zip codes have heavily outperformed. And that's what we're looking at on this map. So we're back to the metro map, looking at Ogden, Salt Lake, and Provo, but the colors this time represent the level of real estate growth in each zip code. So the greener that the zip code looks, the higher the real estate growth. The more light colored or the more blue colored the zip code looks, the lower the real estate growth. So you can see, for instance, 84050 zip code had plus 74%. Amazingly, plus 74% is like kind of average to below average for Salt Lake. So that's why it looks kind of more gray. But then you compare that to a zip code like 84115, which has seen plus 106% growth. So this zip code, 84115, has more than doubled its home value in the last 10 years. And the fact that you see so much green on this map is a testament to the strength of Salt Lake real estate in general. So the fact that you see so much green, that means so much positive real estate growth. As they say, a rising tide lifts all ships. So pretty much everywhere in Salt Lake has done well. But you would have preferred, from a real estate investment standpoint, to buy in the areas where you see dark green. That means that values in these areas went up higher than the rest of the city. And this is just an important point to focus on because, a lot of people like to think of real estate as just, picking different markets to invest in, which of course is extremely important. But being in the right location is also very important. So you want to make an educated decision. If you're looking to buy real estate, you want to make an educated decision on the market you're going to buy in, but then also the location within that market. On this map, which is zoomed in on central Salt Lake City, I've handpicked kind of the top performing zip codes, more or less in the metro area. So, let's start with 84116. This is in the northern part of Salt Lake City. You can actually see that it encompasses the airport. There's a lot of actually kind of vacant land here. Most of the development is to the south or southeast of this zip code. Values here went from 161,000 10 years ago to 340,000 today. That's plus 110%. You move south, now we're in zip code 84104. Values here 10 years ago were 140,000. Today, they're 300,000. They more than doubled, plus 116%. If you guys are enjoying the data presented so far in this video, please make sure to hit subscribe down below and leave a like or a comment. I can do this type of analysis for any city in the US, so please drop me a line if there's some other markets that you would like to see explored. Now let's get back to the video. Moving east, we have 84111 and 84102. These zip codes are a bit denser, as you can see. Not a lot of vacant land, pretty built up, and really good appreciation. What's interesting is 84102, you can tell that's a higher value zip code. So the value today is 442,000, which is pretty expensive. Moving further south, we have 84115. That zip code has increased its value from 180 to 360,000. Then we have 84119, which has increased its value from 165,000 to 325,000. And once again, we're dealing with pretty dense zip codes here. You see a lot of rooftops. You see a lot of industrial and office buildings. Not a lot of new places to build in these locations. If we move further west, though, we find a little more available land. So 84118, that's plus 96%. Kind of the east side of it's pretty developed, but then you go west and all of a sudden you see a lot of land. And if we move even further west into 84044, this is, you can tell, mostly kind of mountainous region, mostly vacant land, and then you have, a small bit of development here on the southeast side. So these are the best performing zip codes in Salt Lake. I also want to call your attention to one additional zip code, which is further north, up in Ogden, 84404. You can tell that this is a really big zip code, covers a lot of land area. Values here doubled almost from 150,000 to 296,000 over the last 10 years. So there is kind of one downside to when you have such a strong decade in terms of real estate growth. And that's, when your average home value goes from say 200,000 to 400,000, you start to think maybe that growth isn't so sustainable because the amount of people that can afford a $200,000 home is a lot more than the amount of people that can afford a $400,000 home. So the more expensive home prices get, the lower the pool of people who can afford to buy them. The lower the pool of people who can afford to buy them, the less demand there is. And that's why you start to sometimes see slowing value growth the higher prices get. So this graph exemplifies that concept. Here we're comparing what the home value was in 2010 in each zip code in the Salt Lake region by what the value growth was from 2010 to 2020. And what you can see is that as you move further right to the graph, the higher the values get back in 2010. So for instance, 84310, its value in 2010 was 356,000. That was the third highest of any zip code in the Salt Lake City region. Its home value growth over the next 10 years was plus 54%, which was the lowest of any zip code in Salt Lake in that span. Compare that on the other end of the spectrum to 84104, which we just talked about a second ago. The home value of 84104 10 years ago was 139,000, so way less than the home value in 84310, which is 355. But you see, because of that, its value growth at plus 116% was much higher. So what this is saying is that the higher and more expensive home values get, the lower they tend to grow going forward. So this could be a potential concern for Salt Lake City in general, because the city in general has gotten a lot more expensive. However, there's two reasons why I'm not so concerned about that. I think Salt Lake will actually have really good appreciation over the next 10 years. The first reason has to do with the tremendous amount of youth in Salt Lake City. The Salt Lake City region is by far the youngest area in America. Let me repeat that. The Salt Lake City region is the youngest area of the country. It has the most teenagers. It has the most young adults. It has even the most kind of young adults into middle age segments. And while that's important is because having a younger population means that you're going to have more of a growing population. And we can really see the Salt Lake region's youth highlighted on this graph, which looks at the youngest metros in the US by median age. So what's median age? That's just simply the middle age in the population. So in Provo, Utah, which is the youngest area in the US by far, the median age is 25. And this might have something to do with how Provo is very Mormon and they have a lot of kids. But what that means is that those kids are going to grow up in Provo and a lot of them are likely going to stay. And that means real estate demand. The second youngest metro in the US is Ogden at 32 median age. The third youngest metro in the US is Salt Lake at 33. So the three youngest metro areas are all in the Salt Lake region, Utah, Utah, Utah. So youth, that's the first factor for why I think real estate values are going to keep growing in Salt Lake. The second reason why I think Salt Lake's real estate market's poised to continue growing has to do with its geography. So there's a lot of, let's just say, heavy terrain in the Salt Lake region. And what I mean by that is that it's in a valley where it's kind of encapsulated in between mountains. And when you're in between mountains, that makes it pretty hard to build and expand new home supply, right? Just building on a mountain is pretty difficult and pretty expensive. In addition to the mountainous ranges that kind of encapsulate Salt Lake, there's also Salt Lake, the actual lake, Salt Lake, which is really big, and is also kind of a barrier to expansion and building. These geographic kind of hindrances to sprawl and growth mean that Salt Lake is not going to be able to continuously add new homes. That restriction in growth of home supply is going to put upward pressure on prices. And to see what I mean, let's look at this aerial map of the Salt Lake region. So we have Salt Lake here in the center, we have Provo to the south, we have Ogden to the north. And you can immediately see what I'm talking about with the terrain. There's just mountain ranges and hills and lakes everywhere. And that's just going to make it really hard to build and continually expand home supply. Let's zoom in a little further actually here on Salt Lake so you can get even a better idea of what I'm talking about. If we tilt into 3D mode, you can see how central Salt Lake is almost in this valley in between two different, peaks, let's say, mountain peaks. And if we zoom in, You could tell they've built basically homes and development right up to the mountain, and then you can't really go any further. If we spin around and look westward, we see a similar story. We see some mountain ranges, some peaks over here, and then we have the Great Salt Lake over here. So you're not building any real estate here. You're not building any real estate here. So in this video, we've established 3 basic points. The first is that the Salt Lake region has been one of the fastest growing areas of the country over the last 10 years. Home values have nearly doubled, and the area is just seeing lots and lots of growth. There haven't been many other places better than Salt Lake to invest over the last decade. The second thing we learned is that while most of Salt Lake has done well, the areas that have seen the most appreciation are towards the center of the Salt Lake City metro area. These places have seen 100 to 120% growth over the last 10 years. In addition, there's one zip code up in Ogden, which has also really seen really good growth. The third thing we learned is that kind of despite increasing values, making the area less affordable, we're probably in store for continued increases in value and appreciation into the future due to Salt Lake's youth, which is going to continually attract population and job growth, as well as its geography, which is going to limit new housing supply even in the face of that population and job growth. That recipe is likely to produce continued real estate appreciation into the future. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Salt Lake is a really hot real estate market. It's one of my favorite in the country. Make sure to also check out some of the other cities that I've explored, including Denver and Austin. And make sure to let me know if there's any cities that you would like to see explored in additional videos. Please also leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Nick from ReVenture Consulting signing off.